you by day, neither the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve you from every evil. The Lord shall keep your soul. The Lord shall keep your coming in and your going out from this time and forever. Hallelujah. Those who trust in the Lord are as Mount Zion. He who dwells in Jerusalem shall never be moved. Mountains are round about her. The Lord is round about his people this time and forever. The Lord shall not allow the rod of sinners to be upon the lot of the righteous, lest the righteous might stretch forth their hands in iniquity. Do good, O Lord, to those who are good, to those who are upright in their heart. But those who turn to stumbles, the Lord would banish the workers of iniquity. Peace be upon Israel. Hallelujah. Together. He arose out of the synagogue and Simon's house, Simon's wife's mother, Rachel, requested stood over her and rebuked the fever, left her. Immediately she arose and served them. The sun was setting. All those who had any sick or disease brought them unto him. He laid his hands on every one of them and healed them. Devils also came out of the lame. You are Christ, God. He rebuking them who defile themselves. Hashem Christos the righteous one is scarcely saved. Where shall I, the sinner, appear? The burden and the heat of the day I do not endure because of the weakness of my companions. But, O merciful God, count me with the fellows of the 11th hour. For behold, in iniquities I was conceived, and in sins my mother bore me. Therefore I do not dare to lift up my eyes to heaven. Rather I rely on the abundance of your mercy, crying out and saying, God, forgive me, the sinner, and have mercy on me. Look, hasten to save you. Open to me the fatherly bosom, for I wasted my life in pleasures and lusts. They have passed by me in vain. Therefore now I rely on the richness of your never-ending compassion. So then do not forsake us, but depart with the speed of your mercy. For unto you I cry, O Lord, humbly. Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired servants. Kenin ke aike sose on. Every iniquity I did with prudence and activity, and every sin I committed with eagerness and diligence. All torment and judgment I am worthy. Therefore prepare for me the ways of repentance, Lady the Virgin. For to you I appeal, and to you I seek intercession. Upon you I call to help me, lest I might be put to shame. When my soul departs my body, attend to me. Defeat the conspiracy of the enemies. Shut the gates of Hades, lest they might swallow my soul. O you blameless bride of the true bride. Lord, hear us and have mercy on us and forgive us our sins. Amen. Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison. 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 Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison. Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison. Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison. Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy. Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison. Holy, 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 Lord of Sabaoth, heaven and earth are full of your glory and honor. Have mercy on us, O God, the Father, Son, and Lord, O Holy Trinity, have mercy. The Lord God of hosts, be with us. We have no help in our hardship, temptation, and you. All forgive and repent, O God, our transgressions, those which we have committed willingly, those which we have committed unknowingly, those which we have committed knowingly, those which we have committed sin and manifest, daylight until evening. O God, accept our glorification and offer now. Save us from the victories of the adversary. Abolish all the snares which are set against us. Grant us in this coming night peace without pain, anxiety, or delusion. Only fasting and all times glorify your holy name together with the Father, Holy Spirit, the life giving now at all times, mercy, God, mercy, all times, worship for Christ our God, the good, the long suffering, mercy, great compassion, loves the righteous, mercy, whom I seek, who does not wish death of the sinner, but rather your salvation. Boast all salvation which comes from good things. Lord, receive from us our prayers in this hour and ease our lives and guide us in salvation. Inspire souls, bodies, heal our disease, deliver us from every evil belief, heart, surround us by your holy angels, camp with us and guard us in faith, knowledge,
Christos Anesti. Wake up. Christ is risen. Very good. So, like we said, we're going to keep the theme of the resurrection throughout the 50 days. Last week, what did we speak about? Me? No. Talk about how the disciples were after the resurrection. Today, we have another super interesting topic about the proof of the resurrection. Right? So we thank Bishoy a lot for preparing something. We already know it's going to be great. So very excited to hear from you. Thank you.
Hey guys, how are you? Okay. We'll be talking today about evidence or proofs for the resurrection. Okay. In the name of the Father. So the reason, like, why are we doing this topic? Um, the resurrection is the core of what Christianity. Without the resurrection, there's no point to this religion. That's why anyone who wants to attack Christianity usually wants to disprove this. If you have everything else, if the crucifixion, the death of Christ, all of that, but he doesn't rise, then he's not God, or sins are not forgiven, there's no afterlife that we go to. What's the point of anything? That's why in 1 Corinthians 15, St. Paul says, if there's no resurrection, Christ is not risen. If he's not risen, then our preaching is empty and your faith is empty and your faith is futile. there's no point to our preaching if he has not risen. And St. Peter says to his followers, what we told you about the resurrection of Christ wasn't some, fable that we made up, wasn't a story, a made up thing that we're telling you just for fun. It's a real thing that happened, has impact. And this is a very important topic because if you get into not it's of course it's important for us to be, to have faith. But if you get into this any argument with any other faith, whether it's Muslim, Jew, uh, atheist, even anyone, no one will accept the fact of the resurrection. This will be a central part of any discussion about defending your Christian faith. So let's get into it. We're going to talk about three main points. First of all, to prove the resurrection happened, we need to prove that Jesus really died. And you might feel that this is like a little silly, maybe, but there is a theory believed by all Muslims that he didn't really die. Some of them believe that he wasn't crucified to begin with, but some of them believe that he was crucified, but he didn't actually die. He fainted, was really tired. He woke up afterwards, after they took him off, and that's why people thought he was resurrected, when he was actually resuscitated. So, did Jesus really die on the cross? Let's start with what a Roman crucifixion looks like. But first, we know that Jesus was whipped, was flogged, right? This whipping or flogging isn't usually a part of the Roman crucifixion, but this happened. So this is what it's called a flagrum. It's usually a whip of braided animal leather, animal skins, with metal balls woven into the strands and with sharp bones at the edges. So it cuts the skin and it even cuts down to the muscles and the bones of whoever is getting whipped. So the person's back would usually be shredded to the point where their spine would show. And some people don't even make it past this point to the crucifixion. Some people just die just from this. And, there are some horrific descriptions by various historians of Roman whipping. I won't get into that. But the point is, what would be the effect of this medically on someone? Besides, of course, the pain. They would have something called hypovolemic shock, which basically means they lose a ton of fluid from all the blood. And when you lose a lot of fluids, you start having difficulty using organs, and you are extremely tired, extremely thirsty, which is what Jesus says on the cross, thirsty. Next, we go to the cross itself. What was exactly the cause of death? When you think of someone on the cross, what do you think actually led him to die? Yeah, that's the main cause of death, asphyxiation, which is he choked. How did that happen? He was fixed in a position where his chest was constantly getting air in, but he couldn't get air out. To get air out, he had to push with his legs, push the air. And after you're up there for hours, you get fatigued. It's the same thing as you're drowning. You try to swim, and then you get fatigued, swim and you drown. It's the same. You get fatigued from pushing himself for hours on the cross, from all the pain, and at some point he just can't breathe anymore, besides all the blood loss. That's why when they come to see if they're dead, they break the legs of the other two thieves. Have you ever thought, like, what's the point of breaking the legs isn't to cause more pain. Breaking the legs is to prevent them from breathing. Break their legs, they can't push up anymore, and they can't breathe. They can't push air out. so they die immediately. Now, when this happens, so you got this sequence where someone is losing a lot of fluid, their heart starts pumping much faster to compensate for this blood loss, and their heart starts failing. They go to something called acute heart, and fluid starts building up. It's like when your sink is backed up, water starts backing up out. Same. Water starts backing up out of the heart into the lungs, heart around the heart itself. That's called an effusion. So you get this image where when the soldier stabbed him, when the soldier stabs Christ with the spear, what comes out? Water and blood, right? Now, did St. John, who documents this in the gospel, study or go to medical school? No, he didn't know any of that. No one knew what a pericardial effusion or pleural effusion was. However, he described what he saw, and it was water and blood, which means at that point, Christ was probably dead. Um, Now, the third thing is some people might say, well, maybe he was like not really dead, and the soldiers maybe didn't know what a dead person, how to determine if someone's dead or not. Maybe they didn't know. They weren't doctors. However, those soldiers, like their main job is killing people. Their main job is not just killing people, but making sure they're dead. Because if they're not dead or if they escape or anything, they will get punished. So those Roman soldiers, they knew what death looked like. It's not, by the way, it's not that difficult. People 2,000 years ago didn't have to go to medical school to, be able to tell what death looks like. Death has certain signs. When you see them, you know a person is dead. They're rigid, they're cold. If you see someone once, that's it. You know. Um, so let's just say for the sake of argument, maybe he survived all of that. Maybe he survived. They took him down the cross. He was still alive somehow, and he woke up somehow without needing an admission. That person who would have survived all of that would look. I mean, he would look pathetic, right? Beaten up, bloody, with wounds all over, huge wound in his chest. That wouldn't inspire anyone to go out and preach and say Christ is risen and die for them. So it's a very unlikely possibility. Well, so far you've been talking to us from what's written in the Gospel. Do we have any proof that this happened from any non-Christian source? Yes, we do. I won't get too much into that, but just like briefly to mention, all these people are people who lived in not all of them, but Josephus, he's a Jewish historian who lived in the first century at the time of Christ's crucifixion, and he mentions it among other things. He wrote a lot of huge history books about everything that was happening at that point in time, and he's Jewish, and he mentions that Christ died under Pilate. He mentions the events of that, and he does say that he died. He doesn't say that he was replaced by someone else, fainted, or and he does say, of course, that his followers claimed he rose up. Tacitus was Roman, Pliny Roman, Lucian his Greek. All these people are very early sources, contemporary even. They mentioned it at the time. So this is fact number one. Fact number one, Jesus truly died on the cross. Okay, what happens next? They put him in a tomb, right? So one of the main arguments for the resurrection is the empty tomb. When the Marys go to the tomb and find it empty uh, Sunday morning, when they go and find it empty Sunday morning, people start wondering, was it really empty? Was there a body there, but they ignored it? Did they steal the body? What went on exactly? So we find this very interesting chapter in the Bible, 1 Corinthians 15. I want you all to go to your Bibles now. Open 1 Corinthians 15. Try to open. 1 Corinthians one word before we go into this. I know this might sound a little weird because we all believe in the Testament and they're all inspired, but there are Bible scholars who study this who are atheists. There are many of them who agree that the very first written documents, First Testament, the New Testament, are the letter to Corinthians and Romans. So those letters, among a few other ones by Paul, are accepted by secular atheist Bible scholars to be the earliest documents written by Christians around the year 50 AD. Christ died 30 AD. And so this was written just 20 years by Paul, and they are accepted to be written by Paul. Okay, this is very important. So atheist scholars accept that First Corinthians is a real document written by Paul in the year 50 AD, just 20 years after that. Keep that in mind. So let's see what Paul says. Paul tells the Corinthians. He tells them, "Moreover, brethren, I declare to you the gospel which I preached to you, when he was there in Corinth, which also you received, and in which you stand, by which also you are saved. You hold fast that word which I preached to you." What is the word that he preached to them? "I delivered to you first of all that which I also received." So he received this from someone before he went to them. That Christ died for our sins according to the scripture, and that he was buried, and that he rose again the third day according to the scripture. So he mentions that Christ died, was buried, and rose. This is the earliest form of the creed. And here it says that he received it from someone, the apostle. And he mentions that he was buried. He was buried in a tomb. This was accepted during the very early years of Christianity. We're talking just 20 years after. So, and I want you to believe to understand something. The Jews didn't believe spiritual resurrection. When he says resurrection, it means a bodily, physical resurrection. It means his body came back. That's what the Jews believed in. So, first point is, there is a very early creed made by Christians accepting that Jesus was buried. Now, the second point is, the site of this tomb was known to the Romans, it was known to the Jews, it was known to people living in the area. So the disciples couldn't really start a movement that gathered thousands of followers with the body still in the tomb. Anyone could have just gone, took that body, paraded it around town and be like, these guys are liars, right? We know where the tomb is. We know there's a body there and it's empty. This guy is still dead. And we also don't have any historical evidence to the contrary. Like, there is no single historical document or historian who says, we found the body of Jesus Christ. No one ever says that. There's not a single trustworthy historian who documents that he found his body. And one other thing, we hear this in the Bible itself, but also from other sources. When the Jews start forming a counter argument to the idea of Jesus rising from the dead, being resurrected, what is the first thing they say? They say they stole his. Why not say anything else? Why stole it? Saying they stole his body directly implies that the tomb was empty. They saw an empty tomb. They couldn't explain it, so they were like, they stole the body. That's the only. So even their counter argument proves that the tomb was empty. And the last thing, the testimony that the apostles give is weird in one way. They mention that the people who found the tomb to be empty for women. Now, this is very problematic in first century Judea because they wouldn't accept a woman as a witness. Not even like lesser than wouldn't accept a woman to begin with. Like women can't testify. So for a woman, for a group of women to be considered the first people to witness this empty tomb, is kind of an embarrassing thing to say if you're making up the story. Why include such detail? Why not just say, we found it? Me, Peter, John, whoever of us. Why include the fact that the first people who found it? They could have just omitted that because they knew no one would believe them if it were made up. Okay. So we established that the tomb was empty. Did the apostles actually preach that? Did they actually say, the tomb was empty? Yes. So we find this multiple times. Acts 4:2. Acts 4:2. They came and the Jewish priests are very disturbed and very angry because the apostles are teaching the people that Jesus was resurrected from the dead. And again, when they're resurrected, the Jews believe in bodily resurrection, which means he wasn't in the tomb; he came out. And Acts 2, Peter's when he preaches to the people in Acts 2 at the end of the chapter, he says he compares the grave of David to the tomb of Christ, saying, David, whose son would be, his heir would be the Messiah. We know where he's buried. We know his tomb, and we have his body in the tomb. But the body of Christ, the true Messiah, his tomb is empty. So he compares those two together and he paints a picture of the empty tomb. Paul also. The same thing. God raised him from the dead. So the next question is, okay, let's assume maybe they were saying that the body wasn't. Who would steal it? I could only think of three possible suspects. I can't think of anything else. Suspect number one, the apostles. Do you think they would benefit from stealing the body and saying that he rose up? Any benefit at all? Of course, they wouldn't do that because doing that would be directly in opposition to the leadership of the day. They would be killed. They would be persecuted, which is what actually happened. All of them died. So they wouldn't do that. Even if they stole the body just to venerate it, they wouldn't go around preaching that he rose from the dead because there's no way for them to prove that. Okay. Option number two, did the Jews steal it? Well, no, because we learn later on that they understood what he meant when he said that he would come back 3 days later. So why would they help, spread that rumor? Why would they steal the body and help spread a rumor that would damage them? And of course, the third option is the Romans. They don't really care. I don't know if any of you can think of those are the only three options. None of them really benefit from taking them. Okay. Now let's go to the fun part. The witness testimony. All right, so we established that Christ truly died on the cross. The tomb he was buried in was empty. There's no proof otherwise. But both these facts alone don't really prove the resurrection. Just prove that he died. Because we need to see the person who was resurrected. So who claimed in the Bible that they saw Christ? Some people claimed that they saw him after he died. Who are they? We see Paul in the same chapter, 1 Corinthians. Let's go back. After that, he was seen by Cephas, that's Peter, and then by the 12. After that, he was seen by over 500 brethren at once, of whom the greater part remain to the present day, but some have fallen asleep. After that, he was seen by James, then by all the apostles. Then, last of all, he was seen by me, also as by one born out of. For I am the least, and he goes on. But the point is, we see mention, Paul says that Christ appeared to him. Paul says that Christ appeared to 500 other people who could, corroborate this evidence. The reason he mentions these 500 people is essentially saying, if you don't believe me, ask these people, they're still alive. They can attest to it. And these people know him. So if he's lying, he wouldn't include these. And he wouldn't really be bribing 500 people to say. Uh, and as I said previously, 1 Corinthians is one of the few documents in the Bible that all scholars, mostly all scholars, even atheist ones, agree that Paul himself wrote. And the reason I'm saying this is, of course, we believe that all the Pauline epistles were written by Paul, but some Bible scholars believe that some of the Pauline epistles were written by others. So this is very important. And he affirmed this in two places. This place where he says, am I not apostle? Have I not seen Jesus our Lord? And then he says in the same chapter, he appeared to me last. So let's go back to Paul a little. Paul, the story of him, the story where he goes to Damascus trying to round up Christians and kill them, and appears to him. What does he do after that? He leaves Damascus and goes to Arabia for 3 years. We don't know what he was doing. And then he goes back to Jerusalem to meet with Peter and James, John, the apostles in the church. And he describes this trip in Galatians, where he uses a very interesting Greek word. It doesn't really translate well in English. He said it translates something like "I went to see them" or "visit them" or something like that. But the actual Greek word is historeo. The word historeo means to investigate or to get an investigative report. So if we would imagine this meeting, Paul would essentially go to them and be like, I will tell you what I saw in the desert if you tell me what you saw. Right? He's getting an investigative report from them. He wants to know exactly, is the person I saw the same person you saw? Are we talking about the same thing? And later in the same chapter, 1 Corinthians, he emphasizes that the other apostles agreed in preaching the same gospel, the same message about the resurrection, which means that the eyewitnesses, like what Paul saw as an eyewitness, witnessed himself, is the exact same thing that they saw. And they agreed on it without ever meeting. Remember, he was persecuting the church. Now, the next point is, one might say, they made the whole story. That's the main argument. This whole story is legend that Christ just died like that. So let's assume that. Let's assume they lied. They made up a lie. Christ actually died and never rose. They were, every single one of them was pressured, tortured, and they didn't fold. None of them folded under the pressure. They all died happily, preaching the same thing, the same exact thing. Why would they do that? Like, sometimes people would die for things, like 9/11. The people who drove those two planes, they were convinced 100% of their ideology. They died for them. But they grew up in those ideologies. It was planted in them since childhood. They received it from other people. Those people who have, however, this theory, they made up a lie. If I made up a lie, I wouldn't die for it. If I get tortured or get reduced with money or whatever, I would fold right away. Why would I persist in a lie that I made up, not a lie that even someone else told me? And persist in a lie about events that I lived. And you get people like Peter and James. Peter, he betrayed his Lord, and James, we see in Mark chapter 3 that he thinks his brother brother Jesus is insane. He thinks, like, imagine your brother goes around town saying, I'm God, I'm the way, the truth, the life. He thought he was insane, but both died for him. So if they made it up also, another thing, if they made up the lie, why include in their stories, their accounts of this lie, why do they include embarrassing details? Like if I'm Peter, and by the way, the Gospel of Mark, for those of you who don't know, Mark was a student of Peter. And Mark, it's agreed that most probably what Mark wrote in his Gospel is what Peter's testimony. Like Mark was writing what Peter told. So why would he include himself betraying Jesus? Why would he include, uh, you know, things like the women being the first witness? Why would they include even something like Jesus dying in this shameful way to begin with? If they're making up a lie, why include embarrassing details in the lie? So the next thing is, do you see that all their testimonies agree? Their testimonies agree with each other, even though they are separated by thousands. Let's assume they are making some sort of conspiracy. They all agreed together that we will say this thing that he rose from. To make any conspiracy work, and make the conspiracy work to the point where everyone believes it, you need five things. Like, let's say I want to conspire with Tom and say that someone from the church is stealing something. In order to make that work, we need five things. First of all, we need the least possible number of conspirators. If we're like maybe 20 people here and we all know about this, that this is a lie, you know how likely it is that someone would rat us out? Very likely. But if it's just me, or me and him, who know about this lie, it's much less likely. And if we make up this lie and then I kill him, it's just me. I'm the only one who knows about this. Dies with me, right? But here you have Jesus appearing to almost 120 people in the upper room. You have him appearing to Paul, Peter, 500 brothers. And, you only need like one person, just one person to fold, one person to say, by the way, we're lying. And it would have all ended, right? So none of them folded. None of them changed their mind. And we're talking like hundreds of them. Now, the next thing you need to make a conspiracy work is a short conspiracy time span. You need it to last for as least amount of time as possible, so people don't really have the time. The apostles lived to tell the same story over the next like 50 to 60 years. Some of them died earlier, of course, but some of them lived a long lifespan and kept telling the same thing over and over. And some of them traveled miles and kept telling the same thing. So, which is the third thing. You need excellent communication. If me and him made up a lie, and he lives on another continent, and we don't have technology, like how Paul was preaching, and then he met the other apostles, Peter, James. He was like, "Are we preaching the same thing?" They didn't have Snapchat back then. They couldn't find each other. Yes, are we preaching the same thing or not? And the fourth thing, you need to have very close ties. Me and Tommy, are we strangers or are we brothers or are we closer than that? If we're really close, very low likelihood of him ratting me out. But you have a band of people who are not necessarily very close together. You got, Matthew, he was a Levite, they kind of didn't like him. Tax collector. You got James, who didn't even believe in Jesus. And, this band of people, they weren't that close together. They didn't have something really that close to stop any one of them from ratting the others out. And of course, you need to execute this conspiracy perfectly so that no one doubts and no one is able to doubt you or ask any questions. So we find that it's kind of impossible to make this conspiracy work. There are too many factors going on to prevent it from actually working. Next question, next theory that some people say: could this have been all a hallucination? Could they have hallucinated? Could they have been delusional? Like they thought they saw him, they truly believed it. Them dying for something doesn't mean that this thing is true. It just means that they truly believed it. So they died for something they truly believed in, but was it true? Did they hallucinate? Have a delusion? Do you think that is possible? Do you think it's possible for 500 people to hallucinate the same thing? Do you think that it's even possible for 2 people to hallucinate? It's just like saying more than one person could have the exact same dream. That wouldn't be normal. So this theory also, it's very weak. And let's say that they did hallucinate. Let's say that all of them were delusional. They're all living in Delulu land. They were hallucinating. Where's the body? We go back to the same question. If he died and they hallucinated his resurrection, where is his body? Why is the tomb empty? And then I want to also, like some people would say, okay, maybe he died and maybe he didn't come back, he wasn't resurrected. And maybe they didn't even say that he was resurrected and it was a later addition. Maybe a few hundred years later, it was an urban legend, it grew, it evolved over time. People started making Christ God and then they made him rise from the dead. And you have the version that we have. The problem with this theory is that as far back in time as you go, you find that we get the same story over and over again. What I mean by that is the disciples, like St. John, for example, they had disciples of their own. They had students of their own. So, for example, St. John had a student called Ignatius of Antioch and another one called Polycarp. Polycarp had a student called Irenaeus of Lyon. He had a student called Hippolytus of Rome. All these people, it's generation after generation, up to the year 100 something, 200 something, 300 something. And we have writings from every single one of these, dating back to the first century, second century, third century. Every single one of them is saying the same exact story. So if you follow the chain, of evidence, or it's called the chain of custody, it's the same story being handed down generation after generation. It wasn't evolving, it didn't change over time. When you follow it over time, it's the exact same thing. They're all saying the same exact things that we say in the creed: Jesus, Son of God, virgin birth, crucifixion, resurrection, second coming. Same exact things, every single one of them is saying. Okay, let's go to a bit that is might be a little. Some people might say, how do you want us to trust that? How do you really want us to trust these books of the New Testament? Maybe we don't know who wrote them. Maybe I don't know. Are they a true recollection of the events that happened? Were they even written close enough to the events to be accurate? So, can we trust the Gospels? Before we answer that question, I want to just give you a brief image or an illustration of something. Have you heard of the Odyssey? There's a movie coming out about it. Anyone heard about the Odyssey? So the Odyssey is like a poem, a Greek poem, written by a guy called Homer, supposedly around the year 800 BC. 800 years before Christ was born. That's 2,800 years ago. Okay? The oldest manuscript, or like the oldest piece of lamb leather that has this poem written on it, dates back to the year 300 something, almost 1,000 years after that. Do you realize like this time gap? you see some of the most trusted uh, pieces of literature in the world, like the Odyssey. No one questions the Odyssey, by the way. It's a fictional story, and no one's like, oh, maybe Homer didn't actually, write that. Maybe it's made up. Maybe it was written in the 5th century after Christ or whatever. People accept that it was written in 800 BC by Homer, or even if it was written by someone. People accept the time it was written in, and the oldest copy of it comes 1,000 years later. Same thing with Herodotus. Is a great historian, lived in the year like maybe 450 BC. The first thing that we have from him comes 1,500 years later. Okay, can you imagine what could happen to a document after 1,500 years? Could you imagine how much it could have been changed over time and altered? The farther away you go in time, the more the document could have been altered and changed, people copying over and over and over could have been changed, right? You see this again with Plato, Aristotle, you've probably heard about. Even Alexander the Great. Do you know that, I mean, I'm assuming everyone here heard about Alexander the Great, right? Alexandria is named after him, great guy, conquered everyone, very brutal, died at the age of 30 something. This guy, the first ever biography that we have about him was written 300 years after he died. Could you imagine the amount of embellishment and changes in the story that could have happened throughout 300 years? The person who wrote this biography never saw Alexander. He was writing based on myths that he heard about. So now we go to the New Testament. We have over, maybe the accepted number by scholars right now is 5,700 manuscripts for the New Testament. And when I say manuscript, I don't mean a full Bible. We don't have 5,700 full Bibles historically. We have fragments. Some of them fragments, some of them full Bibles. Anyways, we have over 5,700 documents, historical documents, dating back to 1st century, 2nd century, 3rd century, that have either just verses from the Bible or whole chapters or a few books from the Bible, and I mean the New Testament. And this is way more than we have for any other author. Like the second thing after that is something like the Odyssey. You have like maybe 2,000. And these manuscripts, you have them in many languages. You have them in Greek, Coptic, Syriac, Latin, and that's great news because when you look back to these documents, even if there are differences between them, even if whatever, someone comes up and says this is the real Bible, you can look at the 1,000 other documents, the 5,000 other copies, compare and be like, no, there are 3,000 other copies saying this verse in this specific way, so it has to be written in that specific way. We have 12 manuscripts dating back to the 2nd century. 2nd century, by the way, is the year 100 something. And Christ rose the year 30, right? I don't know if you're following the math here. And then we assume that the accepted date for writing the New Testament starts around the year 50, around 20 years after the fact. And maybe the last chapter, Revelation, was written around 90 something. So someone might say, all right, well, okay, that's fine. But the earliest ever full Bible that we have is from the late 300s. The earliest full New Testament copy that we have dates back to the year 300. So that's 300 years. Maybe something changed. Maybe the resurrection was a later addition. This is an argument that you will see a lot. A lot of people say that, okay, they can't argue with the death of Jesus. They can't argue with the empty tomb. So they're like, well, it was added after that. Let's play a game. Let's see. Let's look at what Luke wrote. St. Luke writes the book of Acts and the book of the Gospel of Luke. He wrote 2 books in the New Testament. And the book of Acts doesn't mention some some of the most important events that happened during that time, which are the siege of Jerusalem. So in the year 70 AD, that's 40 years after Christ, the Romans are fed up with the Jews and they're like, we're done with it. They just take Jerusalem, destroy the temple, destroy everything. They kill thousands upon thousands, and they end the whole. It's a huge event. It's like a major, major event in history. And the book of Acts doesn't mention it. So it has to have been written before that, right? It doesn't even mention the deaths of Paul. Paul, in the end of the book of Acts, is still alive, right? And it doesn't mention the deaths neither of Paul or Peter. Peter dies 64 AD, give or take. So it has to have been written even before that. It does mention the death of James, John's brother, which occurred and is accepted around the year 44 AD. So Acts was probably written somewhere between 44 and 64. We can assume that. Okay. Well, the Gospel of Luke, which Luke mentions or like is quoted Paul in his letter to Timothy, which is agreed again. Paul's letters, some of them are the strongest documents, like New Testament scholars, even atheist ones, I repeat this again, agree that some of Paul's letters are written by Paul, in fact, are written in specific years dated, like 1 Corinthians, they dated around the year 50, 1 Timothy, they dated around the year 60s. So these are agreed upon facts by people who are not Christian. They don't believe in Jesus. And you see Paul in 1 Timothy quoting from the Gospel of Luke, which means he had the Gospel of Luke at hand and he was quoting from. So the Gospel of Luke had to have been written before the year 60, right? And you also see Paul in 1 Corinthians quoting Luke again, word for word, when he tells them about the Last Supper. He tells them in 1 Corinthians 11, this is the part that we say in the Bible, in liturgy, when we say he took the bread and he blessed it, and the wine and all of that. He says this, quoting word for word from Luke, which means that the Gospel of Luke had to have been written before the year 50, because this letter, 1 Corinthians, is agreed by scholars again to have been written around 50. And the Gospel of Luke was written before Acts. And for Paul to quote the Gospel of Luke, it means, remember, that time they don't have printers, they don't have scanners, they don't have, in order to copy one book of the Bible, you need days, not hours. You need someone sitting and writing every single word and by candlelight, making sure the words are correct and the correct order and whatnot, and leaving the ink to dry. It's a whole process. So if it's copied enough times for it to circulate thousands of miles, reach Paul in Rome, so he or in Turkey or wherever he was far away from Jerusalem, and for it to reach him, and that means that the Gospel of Luke was written a few years before that. So notice we're getting closer to the year 30. What happens at the year 30? Everyone's asleep. The resurrection happens at the year 30, right? So we're getting closer and closer. And Luke, the last thing before you guys complete this, Luke himself quotes the book of Mark a ton. He quotes him all the time. The book of Mark is agreed to have been the first book ever written in the New Testament. Okay? Or not in the, out of the four Gospels, Mark is agreed to have been the first Gospel to have been written. Okay? So if the Gospel of Luke has been written like, let's say, 40-something AD, Mark must have his Gospel circulating even before that. We're very close, maybe like 10 years after the resurrection. The reason I'm saying all of this is because, remember, I just showed you literature that is accepted by all the great universities worldwide, like the Odyssey, Herodotus' words, and the story of Alexander the Great. All of these, the earliest things that we have documenting them thousands or hundreds of years later. while the books of the New Testament were probably written, safe to say, at least at the maximum 10, 20 years after the fact. So it's extremely difficult for a story to evolve just over 10 years in the way that Jesus dying from a regular, the story to evolve from Jesus dying as a regular man to him being the Son of God to him rising from the dead. It's extremely unlikely that that would happen, right? So let's revise. So far, we have said three proofs or three pieces of evidence to the resurrection. The first piece of evidence is that Christ actually died on the cross. The second thing is that we found the empty tomb. And the third thing is the testimony of the witnesses proves that they truly believe this and that it's very unlikely for this story to have changed. Now, I want to talk to you about something. We're done with the boring part, the apologetics part. But I want to talk to you about something, that the fruits of the resurrection. You know, when you're talking with someone who has doubts, whether they be Christian, a Christian friend who has doubts, or a Muslim or a Jew or an atheist or whoever, you know, logic can only take you so far. Believe me, you can waste years debating and going back and forth, and oh, if I can just prove this part to him and give him this argument and he'll believe and whatnot. Believe me, this logic can only take you. You know, a simple person, you see simple people in the face of adversity. Like let's say, let me ask you this: Did Saint anyone? Who do we have? Anyone? Saint George. Did Saint George know the historical, the number of years between the first manuscript and whatever, and the arguments for the resurrection? Do you think he knew? Right? Do you think he knew these arguments? Could he stand up and refute and prove the resurrection to someone? I bet he didn't, right? But he endured 7 years of torture for Christ. Do you think the 21 martyrs of Libya knew how to prove the resurrection, and the Gospel of Mark was written before the Gospel of Luke? Or all of that. They didn't know any of that. They were people who truly loved Christ, who truly lived a Christian life. They lived their faith. And when people saw Christ in them, they were like, we want to be like that. That is true Christianity. So, you know, knowing Bible facts and knowing, you know, arguments and whatnot, it's good, great. But that's not how you win. It's not how you get someone to believe in Christ. If you debate all day and then they see you going out and gossiping, making fun of people, and being a jerk, they won't care. It doesn't matter how many arguments you give them. If people don't see Christ in you, they will never seek him, because they wouldn't know what he looks like. What is he? So, you know, I just want us to all have faith in the resurrection, rejoice in the resurrection, in the fact that there is an afterlife, there is something better after this, and that we can live now the life that we want to live in heaven. And I want you to be happy and rejoice in this fact that our God beat death. And if he does that, he can beat anything that you're struggling with. And if you know anyone who is having doubts, or, you know, of course it's good to look up these things and try to prove. But the best thing you could do is love them and pray for them. Believe me, this goes many more miles than trying to prove only with logic. So, one last word on resources. If any of you are remotely interested in these topics and want to read more, these books are great. If anyone wants to start with something, I would highly recommend More Than a Carpenter. It's a very small book, it's like 150 pages. You can listen to the audiobook or whatever, read it on your phone. It's very brief, very to the point. Uh, it skips a lot of the details, but it's got like the important stuff. Case for Christ is great. Cold Case Christianity is an amazing book. But the book that I tell people the most about is Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. I love that book. You can read it, even if you're not remotely interested. This is a book about a Muslim guy who becomes Christian because he saw Christ in one of his friends. And he tells you like his whole story. It's one of the most wonderful things you can ever read. Not just like he has a lot of apologetics inside, but it's in like a story form. So it's like you're just reading a story about a guy. And it's, believe me, it's one of the best books you could ever read. If you could listen to the audiobook, he narrates it himself. All right, guess that's it. Anyone has any questions? No questions? So if I point at any one of you, you could prove the resurrection to me? Can I quiz you? Let's just repeat the three things so fast. What is the first thing that what is the first part of this argument? Point number one. I want to hear people. Christ died on the cross, right? What's the second thing after that? There's an empty tomb that we can't explain. Okay, what's the third thing after that? Witnesses. All right, that's it. I rest my case. Thank you so much. Glory be to God.
Let's thank Troy for this amazing talk on the proof of the resurrection. Something with lots of deep context and deep details that are very hard to grasp, but I think Troy presented it very well for us. I'll get the announcements and attendance up on the screen. But in the meantime, just to reiterate something Troy said that I really loved was that some of the saints, they don't even know how to kind of do these debates or know all these facts. Like the 21 martyrs, when Troy said it, reminded me of when we were in Egypt, and we can see that some of them didn't even know how to write. They didn't even know how to spell their name. Yet, there's churches built after them. There's saints in our church. They've converted many people all over the world, right? That's kind of the important part, that people see Christ in us, and then we also need to be knowledgeable as well. So, attendance, get your phones ready. Here we go. Everyone should scan the attendance, please. Leave it up for another 10 seconds. While that's up there, I'll get some of the details for the retreat, and I'll put the barcode up. Very important, the retreat is June 19th, 20th, and 21st. I think some people forgot that June 19th is a holiday, so I think most of us are off. I know a lot of people were confused when we said we're leaving in the morning, so Friday, I think a lot of people are off. So don't worry, you should be able to make it. If not, let us know. Don't let that stop you from coming. Speak to one of the servants. So we'll be leaving Friday, hopefully early in the day, heading to Washington, D.C. Everything that you need to know, or at least fill out to register, is on this flyer. Scan this barcode. So as you can see up there, it's $250 up until this Thursday, right? So the form automatically makes it $300 to register on Friday. Okay? Not us, it's the form. Don't blame us. Okay? Again, like I said before, the reason behind this is that Boston, we were in a retreat house, part of the diocese, part of a different church. That we can just text on, hey, we're adding one more person. Here we're staying in a hotel. Lots of things need to be reserved in advance, so we need to know the numbers as soon as possible. Okay, please fill out the Zephy link. There is a thing that asks for donation. The donation thing on the Zephy link is to the website, not to us. So if you want to donate to us, don't donate on the website. If you want to donate to Zephy, whatever they take your donation for, by all means, but just to let you know that we don't see any of that. Okay? Please fill out all the details. If you have any questions, reach out to any of the servants as soon as possible. Okay? I saw that many of you were filling it out earlier today, but definitely nowhere near the amount that we're expecting. So please, please, please fill out all the forms. Okay? More details to come, but I guess things that we have planned already. We'll be going to the Bible Museum. We'll be going to St. Mark's in DC. What else? The monuments in the area. So lots of fun things planned. It'll be a very good mix of Boston. Like Boston was half spiritual, half fun and activity. Like I think Saturday was all spiritual. Sunday was fun and activities. We were out. This should be similar, but it might be like Saturday morning spiritual. Saturday night we'll go out, eat, or go see monuments. We will have liturgy one of the days. We'll probably go pray liturgy in St. Mark's in DC and attend their young adult meeting over there. Okay? Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, lastly, definitely not least, very, 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 very happy to announce that we will have 2 new baptized people into our church. So this Saturday, please come and let's celebrate Greg and Tom being baptized this Saturday. So the baptism will start at 7:30 in the morning this Saturday, obviously in the baptism room, and then we'll look forward to see everyone after in celebration with them. Okay? Let's stand up to pray. The prayer box, you can throw your prayers in there, and the donation box will be both up here and downstairs during the prayer meeting. There's pizza downstairs for fellowship after, and maybe the next game.
Have you seen him, the one I love? Have you seen him, the holy man? Have you heard him, his gentle voice? Have you heard him, the great I am? I am dark, but I am lovely. Among the thorns I am his rose and lily, his banner over me, his love and grace. And nothing gives me joy like his tender face. Have you seen him, the seen him, the holy man? Have you heard him, his gentle voice? Have you heard him, the great I am? I was wounded, broken and empty, but his spirit rushed in and filled me. I was waiting for life and healing, but his sweet eyes alone restored my feeling. Have you seen him, the one I love? Have you seen him, the holy man? Have you heard him, his gentle voice? Have you heard him, the great I am? The oil I poured on him could not consume. His sweet aroma, it filled the room. Come and meet him, sit at his feet, drink in his beauty, it set me free. Have you seen him, the one I love? Have you seen him,